Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and I'm delighted to be joined by Paul Sheridan of the Wakes. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thanks very much.
It's an absolute pleasure. It's just a shame that we're doing this remotely, because you could have brought your acoustic guitar along and we could have had a wee session.
I know, it's just times that we live in just now, so I know there's been a few things on my part that's been unable to happen, but yeah, here we are. Eventually we'll do it, and we're miles away from each other.
I know, and it's one of these things. You've got to keep talking about Celtic under the circumstances, because there's still a lot to consider. I mean, this week, Paul, the decision was made to finally crown Celtic as 9 in a row champions. How did you find out, and were you able to celebrate?
Found out from a message coming through, was passed over, champions, and that's it. And you kind of go, well, I was for months and months imagining in my head the celebrations, the final whistle, all that going on, the explosions, the atmosphere, and then it was just a kind of text message, there we are, we're champions, and you're like, excellent, and delighted to have been that, and that's still that euphoric feeling. I can't at all take anything away from what's happened this season, but then celebrating at night time by a Zoom call with about 15 other guys on it, appearing randomly, and you know, we'd have celebrated in the pub or elsewhere, and there will be that time for celebration another time. But it's you know, I've been loving every minute of it at the same time. But I have to just accept how it's been handed to us in the end. That we, you know, but Celtic can't take anything away from the players, how the effort they've put in this season, the fact it's been won on merit. Just this last week, but it's that kind of, we've got this, but it's maybe just not how I imagined it happening.
I think there's so much of the community aspect. I know there's clubs now call themselves community clubs, Paul, but when you think of football and going to watch your football team and going to watch Celtic, the community aspect of that is the passion, it's the emotion, it's, you know, turning round during the Hampden season when Tony Mowbray scored in the last minute against Dundee United and just cuddling some guy that you've never met before in your life, and that community aspect is supporting Celtic, unfortunately, has been taken away. And I think as much as I've enjoyed winning the 9 in a row and that being announced this week, it's been tinged with a wee bit of regret that we weren't able to do it in the community aspect that Celtic are famous for, Paul. I mean, when we're able to get back to meeting up in groups and going back to the football, do you think there'll be even more of a scenario where we'll appreciate it more? I mean, I appreciate Celtic anyway, but I think, like anything in life, you can start taking things for granted. What's it going to be like when we go back and you walk up the steps into Celtic Park again?
I think there's an unrealistic, not an unrealistic, there's a kind of a non-real feeling of everything that's kind of going on around us just now. I had to take my car a bit further than I would usually have to one day to go to Tesco. I think this is like a whole new world I'm walking into as I drive to a Tesco that is not my Bells Hill usual local ones, but go much for a change. When we go to Celtic Park again, or we go to somewhere else, that'll be, and you walk out and look to see it, it's almost as if it would be walking into a kind of dream sequence. This kind of feeling of, you know, I think the fact that COVID-19, the cut-off came, the lockdown came, everything kind of stopped at that point. To be able to reopen it again and see what, you know, walk down the smell and the onions and the stalls at the side, or talking to your pals just randomly, walk by, the handshakes, you know, going by into the turnstile, getting to your seat, looking out, hearing that first, we may have missed a few minutes of the game at the start, or hearing the warm-up, or hearing the tannoy getting announced. I think it will almost be like going back to your first ever Celtic game. That's what I think it's going to be.
Oh yeah, I think there will be an added amount of emotion when you walk back into Celtic Park. And talking of going to Celtic Park, What was your introduction to Celtic, Paul? Who was your Celtic team that you remember growing up?
Well, I was saying this morning, and I was talking to my dad. As a wee boy, the team that I really, really remember is the centenary year team. It's the Dundee United, the cup final game is the same day I made my first communion. I remember Uncle John, Uncle Jerry, my dad, in the house, exploding as the winner went in. I remember that as a wee baby, and I've got a daughter at 3. I remember I must have been around that time. My dad singing the songs of Lisbon Lions, and it was the same tune as the Merry Playboy, but it was off to Lisbon in the green, the Celts are playing in the sun. And you're not, I was only 13 years removed from that Lisbon team, and you kind of go up on the tails of them, but all you have to go on is snippets of video. So the 88 team is the team I do really, really remember. What loved Comics Day. The team that kind of loved and breathed Celtic, and many times cried with Celtic, is the team, the Tommy Burns era of the 94-95 season. From that point onwards, and every few weeks, not I didn't have season ticket, but it was every few weeks of the games home, and a few away games as well, and that was a point of getting you feeling sick on a Saturday morning because you're not sure if you're going to take a one against Falkirk. Do you know what I mean? That kind of, and you savoured those chances. So, and the 1994, getting the Coca-Cola Cup final, sitting in the house, and it's my birthday the next day, and thinking, we're going to do this isn't written, and then. No, it's not happening. My neighbours were all Rangers fans in the house, slagging us and shouting down the phone. So that's the kind of self. So Well 88 team is the team that I loved as a wee on Comics Day and Tommy Burns. The 94-95 team from that point onwards is the team that you loved and beat Celtic with every week from that point onwards.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly do have similar reference points because I always look on the centenary side, Paul, as being my first great Celtic team that I watched. I mean, I had been wanting to go for years before that with my dad and uncles and cousins, etc. But for their own reasons, they didn't want to take a bearing to the football, and that's fair enough because when my old man started taking me, it was quite clear that obviously it was just a jolly for the boys, going out to the boozers, and then you've got the situation where you're standing outside pubs getting fed Coca-Cola and packets of crisps, for hours while the guys get tanked up. But that, again, it's just part and parcel of that era of Celtic and going to watch Celtic. And obviously, I think when you look at that Tommy Burns side, and obviously we're doing this over Zoom and you're wearing the famous strip that we wore in the Scottish Cup final, I think the biggest regret for me was that, and I've spoken to quite a few people about this, Tommy was so emotionally attached to Celtic, and he just couldn't get that monkey off his back, Rangers. Even when we went a full season with one defeat, we still couldn't get over the line. And I think now, looking back, the biggest regret is Tommy wasn't up against a team who were being assembled fairly. And we know that now. We know that the ways of David Murray from, the day he walked into Ibrox were not on the same level as any other club. And it wasn't because they were signing brilliant sponsorship deals or selling more merchandise or getting more people through the door. That wasn't the reason that they were so rich, because you used to always think to yourself, how can they buy this player? And it goes right back even before David Murray and the signings that they were making back in 86, but then it continued. And my biggest regret is Tommy Burns built a side that I think if there was that, fairness in the game at that time, Paul, Celtic would have not only been league winners, but they would have been worthy winners. And the team that he assembled a couple of years after the Scottish Cup final with Di Canio, I know obviously Di Canio and his politics don't really mix too well with Celtic, but Di Canio, Tom, Cadet, Van Hooijdonk, what a side. And I still look back on that side and it was some of my most exciting times watching Celtic, Paul. I mean, when you look back and we talk about a Celtic way, and it can sometimes sound like a cliche, that team that Tommy Burns had certainly did play entertaining football the Celtic way, didn't they?
I think there's a huge difference in the team style of play from the 94-95 season to the 95-96 season, where Celtic were pulling out last-minute wins. I remember Dundee United game and holding up bomb score in the Scottish Cup, or just exhilarating this new dimension, new dynamic with Jackie McNamara and Simon Donnelly, and there's that video on target stuff is blowing everyone apart, and that's what still breaks my heart, is the fact that they only lost that one game to Rangers in the October, I think it was, or September, when Gaza scored, and still managed to lose the league. I remember it was like drawing games with Kilmarnock and drawing games with Thistle. One each draws, nothing each draws. We just couldn't finish that off, and then into the 96, 97, you think, well, also you're talking about the disadvantages. Still the disadvantage whenever we signed Cadet and we delayed his registration for to mean that we can play him in the Cup. And then into the 96, 97 season, there was a huge pressure, I think, on Pauli, but it was also on everyone. I feel like I found it really, the 96, 97 season so difficult to even look back on, because most of the Rangers equalled 9 in a row, but the same way Celtic were a great side, but just that, it just didn't happen at the end. And I remember when Celtic played Kilmarnock, the night Rangers won against Dundee United, and I remember that feeling of dejection walking home as they clinched 9 in a row, and then Tommy leaves. Pauli the Canio says, I won't be here much longer. You're thinking, how can we come back? And it's, guys is here for 10 in a row and everything else. And then a lot of that core of that team sort of left as well. John Collins had gone, McStay retired, Peter Grant went in Norwich, I think, Van Houten was away, he hung up his, he said he wasn't playing. Today it went. You're thinking, Paul McStay on, the kind of last one game, I think, under them. And then Bernie Hansen brings in all these new players, and it was such a low, I think, whenever the 96, 97 season, even though we could win it in 95, 96, Celtic still brought great hope back. Tommy brought great hope back to the fans that there was something to build on and something to take to the next stage. Just watching, I think we lost at Parkhead. I think it was the game that McNamara was McNamara was sent off.
That's right.
And I remember just thinking, things cannot get any worse. And I don't think anything ever got worse in football than that. Even the bittersweet memories of Seville. I think that 96, you're 16 years old, and all your pals are going mental, and you're just like, oh man, this is terrible. I think that Tommy brought great hope that there was something better. And then when he left, I thought, how we can get back here?
See the big thing, Paul, and I know it's turned into a bit of a running joke about being a Celtic da and referencing the 90s and all this kind of stuff, but there is obviously a generation that didn't have to put up with some of the stuff we were being served up with back in that period. But to actually go through, and it's a point you make there, to go through Rangers at that time winning 9 league titles in a row and being surrounded either at school or with your pals or guys that you maybe played football with who were Rangers fans. I mean, it was nightmarish. You were the butt of every joke for 9 years through your life, and I'm not going to say I was mentally scarred by it, but it galvanises you in many ways, Paul, because when you then enjoy the good times, Wim Jansen coming in that one season, the fleeting season of Wim Jansen, enjoying Henrik Larsson developing into a modern day icon, going to a European final under Martin O'Neill. One of the things I kind of pose now and again is Neil Lennon. I'm a massive Neil Lennon fan, and I know that when he came back in, Paul, and he was announced as a permanent manager after the treble was clinched against Hearts, there were people who were unhappy with that. And I just think it's because of the nature of Brendan Rodgers, his status, this box office appeal that he had, coming in after having a big job in England, that kind of thing. But Neil Lennon has, for me, been very impressive this season, not just domestically, because I believe he would have gone on to win yet another treble, but also in Europe, Paul. And I think there's been a big change in the Neil Lennon that we have now compared to who was a rookie manager first time round. What's your thoughts on Lenny's performance this season?
It's been great. Like yourself, when Lenny came in after Brendan Rodgers left, he thought it's a steady hand to take us through. He knows what we need to do, get us over the line. But then you kind of, as the season was kind of coming to an end, it was all getting Rafa, getting Mourinho. Even the fact that Celtic didn't stumble over the line or didn't stumble, but there was times you think I didn't play as well as we could have, and then we're kind of putting it the blame with Lennon. Times you think, even though we're still winning, and then win the Scottish Cup, come back, and then it's tremendous, and then it's been told that Neil was given a job, and there was a kind of an anticlimactic feeling in some respects there from different parts, and also fueled, I think, by the media too, and different people saying, this is the best signing Rangers could have made. But Celtic came through, played really well in Europe, did some great performances over the course of the season, and it's a very different Neil Lennon from what I think he was when he took us, steered the ship in 2010, 2011 when Tony Mowbray left. I think he's not been as fiery in media comments or as his rivals across the city. He's very much, especially that first Old Firm game of the season when he says everyone wrote us off, and I don't really think he spoke at all before the game. And the week building up to it, he just did his job. He got the players to do their job. Fantastic performances in Europe, winning away in Italy, winning away in Rome, in France. Coca-Cola, this memory of Coca-Cola Cup for a League Cup final, a win. He did the right things at the right time. He then, where he felt as though he changed things again in January. I think when Celtic came back out in January, they played some really dynamic football, excellent performances. I think Edward on a really good game as well, although Edward has always been on a good game. I think he had things with his decisions to maybe play Griffiths. He took a guy who, I remember Griffiths in the game at the Parkhead in December, and he spied it, and everyone's like, in his face. Griffiths came back in January, he was a different person, a different animal. And I think it's been very good, and I really, really see Lennon as going somebody that's has to go down in the annals of history. And Celtic is one of the great managers. I've been really, really pleased, and I'm happy to see that he took any forms of uncertainty about him and completely blew out of the water with how he's managed the team and the results that he's picked up on the park.
Absolutely. Now, Paul, in being brought up on Celtic from the generation before me, my family, my dad, you're brought up with the stories of Celtic being a European force to be reckoned with. 2 finals and various semi-finals and quarter-finals. We experienced that in our generation, but the thing you've got to remember, it was the first time we had actually gone beyond Christmas in Europe since 1980, when Martin O'Neill took us through. And you think to yourself, in order for Celtic to do that back then in 2003 and get to Seville, it required a massive sea change in the way that we were running the club, if you like. We had to bring in Martin O'Neill, which was a massive appointment at that time. We had to spend big money, and Martin O'Neill was plucking players directly out of the English Premier League. Chris Sutton, Neil Lennon, Alan Thompson, the list goes on. Celtic, as we stand now, have completely dominated Scottish football for the best part of a decade. And we're now looking at a Scottish football that's going to be weakened. And when we go back, when that happens after the coronavirus, Paul. So you would expect that Celtic would continue to dominate to the point where the domination would be even more complete, because, the Scottish football is going to be weaker. Do you think that in our lifetime, a change can be made or an approach could be had where Celtic could be a European force again? Or do you think the time has come for us to start looking elsewhere outside of Scottish football?
I think that the system of both the Europa League and the Champions League with the group stages requires sort of most of a form in terms of sort of longevity across the more games every time. There's also some huge teams that drop into the Europa League, or some big teams that are in the Europa League because they haven't achieved the championship in their own country. So Celtic, every team that stands up against very, very tough opposition. I didn't believe at the time when we got to Seville that season. I remember we lost at Pauli. I thought, I can't really see much happening, and all of a sudden put this run together. It was a knockout format as well, so as the golf goes on and the bigger clubs are given more and more money, and there's less and less money going into Scottish football, and Celtic are further disadvantage. If league reconstruction was to happen across Europe, then you would hope that clubs would be, like Celtic, would be invited to be part of that, and it all really depends on how other leagues deem to play. If they think they can make money from having an elite league, then Celtic may be invited to something like that. And I feel as though Celtic have still got to remain in Europe as well. I would hate to think that clubs like Bournemouth and lower league Premier League teams have more financial clout than Celtic do, or would appear more attractive to somebody wanting to apply their trade in football. So I would, and that's no disrespect to Bournemouth, but they're not Celtic. I would hope that Celtic would be able to part of any talk of league reconstruction. Everything is very much dependent on the people who run European football and the people who feel as though they can make money from football, and that would be how Celtic would become part of that. So it's like, I'd love it to happen. It might happen, it might not, but I mean, it's so up in the air just now with everything that's going on in the world.
Absolutely, Paul. I took note of your early recollections of your introduction to Celtic, and you were talking about in particular the song, and I think the intrinsic link between Celtic and song is so important. It's always been important. I mean, when I think back to my introduction to Celtic and travelling through in the buses and cars, and it is the music. The music is what prepares you for the game, and then you listen to it again when you come back, or when you actually start getting a wee bit older and you go in and enjoying maybe get an after-match pint or two and there's a live band on. And obviously you're involved in that yourself in a big way just now, Paul. How important do you think music is to Celtic? Because I know a lot of people think, well, music's important to all football clubs, but you've mentioned a couple of English clubs here, and I hear time and time again clubs who don't really have any really identifiable songs. It's just generic. But what you've got with Celtic is you've got not only the historical songs of the club, talking about the Coronation Cup, the 7-1 game, we've got traditional Irish folk songs, rebel songs, we've got songs for players, and we're very creative and inventive. I mean, even, I Want to Be Edward, something that I know it was maybe a terrace anthem elsewhere, the Stone Roses track, but the way that Celtic have adopted that and others, how important is the music to the Celtic?
I remember years and years ago reading a magazine, and they were talking about, it was to do with football chants, maybe like total football. It was a kind of 1990s publication, but they talked about how Celtic didn't just have chants, they had songs. It was an English journalist who was writing about this. But Celtic have had a historical link to songs for years, going back to like the 20s. There's a kind of newspaper article at a Celtic Rangers game, and they talk about how the fans in the terraces were singing God Save Ireland, and it's like Celtic have had this link because I think it's been so important, and it's kind of dropped in through the years, and because so much of Celtic's the fans' cultural Irish identity was preserved through, suppose if you like, call it community singing, almost singing in the terraces, singing, and not just chanting a player's name or ideal United for the cup, or but it was like very much in, thousands of people singing ballads on the terrace. It doesn't happen in many clubs. I think it was very much a case of Celtic's fans being able to preserve identity and coming in a society where they would have been outsiders. Some of those opportunities for them to have got together would have been a Saturday, a match day, where they could come together and sing as one. Obviously, as time went on, different songs became more and more popular on the terraces as well, and then you've got like Glenn Daly, the Celtic song released as an LP, becomes part of that tradition as well. And it's not just the old songs from the homeland that comes in on the terrace, and I think it's always kind of continued right through the 60s, the 70s, even whenever we're in the 90s and Celtic are doing that well, we're singing always like the bright side of life, But I think that part of the whole idea of this kind of the fan base is very much the songs are an important part of Celtic culture, I feel like, and it's very important because it takes so many different parts. It's grown or it's changed. Even when you look at like how other clubs in the continent, talk about the Celtic the atmosphere at Parkhead, you never walk alone. These are iconic things that happen only at Parkhead. When it comes to these whole-scale European nights and Celtic fans in groups, retaining our identity, putting a pride in the players and everything else. So I think that the key to so much of Celtic's fan base comes from songs, and it goes right back, to the 1920s and further back than that. And that's a kind of real core in terms of how our fan culture is developed over the years.
Absolutely, Paul. I mean, you mentioned fan culture there, and there's plenty to discuss when you're talking about Celtic and fan culture. And I've always followed the friendship that Celtic have had with St. Pauli of Germany, and I know that obviously as a band, your band have adopted that yourself. And I went over to try and experience it myself, and I've read up on the club. There's a brilliant book out there as well. And St. Pauli, tell me about your relationship with them, and do you honestly think that a club like St. Pauli, who people gravitate towards, they're almost like the rebel's choice, anti-fascist, anti-homophobia, everything that you would want, I would guess, in a community club, and in Celtic, they do it, and they're rebellious. And I befriended a couple of St. Pauli fans when I went over some time ago, and they were saying that even the merch, the famous black and white merch, even that, the fans were rebelling against that, and they had developed a new one, a red and black skull design, because of the commercialisation. It started off as a club who were just a kind of non-entity, and then the fans took over the asylum, didn't they? What's your kind of connection to St. Pauli, and how involved are you with the club? Would you say they're your second team?
Yeah, very much. Yeah, definitely. Now I think this is 10 years this weekend to the time that we went and played over in their stadium for the 100-year anniversary, and that was like they were inviting us as the kind of link to Celtic fans, all different Hamburg or different groups from all across the world were coming to play. We were the one that was linked to the Celtic. I kind of got as a fan, and the kind of it was a friend of mine who introduced me to the kind of relationship at Celtic in the kind of about 1996 or so. But then it would have been about 2004. I'd have been going over, and then we get invited to come and do this St. Pauli party in 2009, and I was a Pilgrims fan as well, and I love the fans of St. Pauli, the song, so I thought we would write one for them, and we used that the year later we used that later on that year to try and build a fan room for match day under the stadium, to allow their fans to come, or bands to come and do different events. So that's kind of, and then from that we did different events over the years, sort of directly to the club too. I think that now it's a huge big stadium. It's different from when I thought the early 2000s where the stage was much smaller. All the stands are fully developed, fantastic atmosphere. And obviously you got me earlier on before we went on air with Not the View. I think it was like Joe Miller was really heavily involved in establishing the kind of link with Celtic fans and St. Pauli fans, and I know the games of football against each other, and trips over here and bus trips over there. And I think that like nowadays, if you're kind of a young sort of Celtic fan and you're seeing the merch worn at the stadium, either or a young St. Pauli fan, you might not kind of know that original link, where it was the team were there because they said, look, we both identify with these are the politics, this is how we feel about football, this is how we feel about football, and that friendship kind of came then. I think it's just a kind of it's kind of grown and grown, but maybe sometimes people don't see where that initial link had kind of started. We were meant to be going over a few weeks ago whenever coronavirus kicked in, and it's not happening obviously now. That's really sad. But I would say, I'm watching it in Saturday, the Bundesliga on Sunday. It was just over the relegation zone, two very different teams, Celtic and Pauli. If people get a chance to go, it's a really experience, but I think that when it comes to the two clubs, both have got to. Somebody had to move on as well with modern times. The expenses, of course, of running the club, and I know they had the changes to the merchandise or the fans fighting back against commercialisation, but the fans have got a voice in St Pauli where they can actively say, no, this is bullshit, this isn't happening, we don't want this to happen, and make a stand against it. And I think sometimes, even at Celtic, whenever the fans take something back or say, no, this shouldn't happen, we don't have as much power when we come up against the board, or we come up against things that we don't agree with at Celtic. Whereas in Germany, they're much more like, okay, you have your say because of the different rulers of ownership. So they're very different clubs, but I think they've very similar outlook. And the fans have got very similar outlook on politics and everything else as well. And the right thing, I think most of the time, against homophobia, against racism, against fascism, against everything else that that we should be fighting against.
Absolutely. We had Joe Miller some time ago now, probably about a year ago, came on, Paul, and spoke to us. And as I say, I've always been into Not the View and the St Pauli thing. I just started hearing a few songs and seeing the skull and crossbones, and then I'm the type of person that needs to find things out, and obviously it developed from there. But I was speaking to Joe and I said to him, why on earth of Celtic? I know the centenary game you're talking about when Paddy McCourt scored a typically mazy goal. McCourt would have been a great player for St Pauli as well, I think. But I says to Joe, why don't Celtic invite St Pauli over for a friendly? I mean, we've season on season, we're always inviting clubs that we don't really have any kind of link to. Back in the day, not that long ago actually, we would regularly play English clubs, Paul, and they were a big pool. But these days, we're bringing clubs from all over the place, and it's a bit of a nothing event. I think if you were to bring St Pauli over, it would be a sellout for a start, but it would be a real carnival atmosphere, and it would be a whole weekender, I guess, with musical events and everything else that would be put on. Why do you think it is that Celtic haven't embraced that?
I don't know. I think maybe a few years ago it could have happened. I don't know if it's maybe to do with cost. I don't know why. I know some people are now going, of course, to America quite a lot during the summer. Celtic's priorities in the summer is that really now we're focusing on the Champions League things coming in early. I don't know why that's not happened. Maybe I can ask somebody they might know the reason why. I don't know. I know we used to play the Man United quite, or Arsenal, teams like that. Or is it going to the stage where the only way you're going to get it is if somebody requests it for a testimonial game? I'm really unsure why that's never happened. And do they feel as though they could get a bigger amount for a kind of glamorous game against a Serie A side or a rather than taking a second division, in recent years as well, third division German side to come over to play? Is it the cost involved in that too? I really can't answer that question with any knowledge at all. I'd love to see it happen because I know it would be a good weekend.
It certainly would. It would be longer than a weekend, wouldn't it? It'd be a long weekend, I think, Paul.
Yeah.
3 or 4 day party. I mean, we've mentioned it, we've touched on it slightly, the politics that's involved with supporting Celtic. And again, Paul, I don't try to claim that every Celtic fan is politically minded. Of course they're not. But when a club like Celtic are founded, and the only reason they're founded is because of oppression, and it's because of people who are starving and people who have come over from Ireland, and they're still needing a source of charity, 40 years after the famine, then that is political. It's political because the only reason they were in that scenario in the first place was due to the genocidal nature of the way that the Brits and Charles Trevelyan dealt with the famine. So Celtic and politics, for me, are intrinsically linked from even before the club was formed. Yet we're continually told you can't have a political viewpoint at a football game. You can't fly a banner with a politically motivated banner. What's your thoughts on that, Paul? Because I think it's difficult if, for example, your club is only in existence because of the politics around about Glasgow and Scotland at that particular time and the oppression against the Irish. I think it's one of these things that, on the one hand, the club embraces some elements of what the fans are saying and doing, and a lot of that obviously is voiced by the Green Brigade, Paul. But then on the other hand, you do sometimes feel like the fans rather are a lone voice, when it comes to the political aspect of the club's foundation and how it still affects so many fans to this very day. Paul, do you still think Celtic and politics should go hand in hand?
I think that very much the club, in terms of your first point there, I think often the club will use the Green Brigade when it suits them to kind of, if you know what I mean, to like take a photo of a display that they've made or a banner and sell it on merchandise or sell a framed picture. But as soon as they feel as though it's something that's not for Celtic, then they're the first to jump on punishing them and saying you can't have this place. Maybe at your early point, that may be one of the reasons that you don't bring St Pauli, because St Pauli have a very political in their viewpoints as well, Yeah. Celtic very much leave the politics at the door in terms of the official sort of part of the line of the club. I think that Celtic, when you go back to hundreds of years ago, 100 years ago, or you go back to the 20s, or you go back to the times before that, when people needed a voice, that was where it could be expressed, was on the terraces. So I think to remove that aspect from Celtic, from what it stands for, then I think you remove a huge chunk of the social and cultural importance of Celtic as well. In the 1950s, they tried to, the Irish flag flew over Parkhead, and there was to take it away. And then in the there was people calling in the 1920s for repatriation for the Irish community. Where Benny Lynch was the world boxing champion, Gorbals boy, Irish background. So I think Celtic having that kind of idea of the element of the underdog for hundreds of years, for all the time in existence. I think that the politics play a huge part. It seems, if you look at a club like Barcelona, where the Catalan language was banned from Spain, and the only place they could get together was on the streets, on the terraces of the Nou Camp. So I think it has its place very much in terms of being able to speak out or to have that sort of an oppression, or there's a social cultural importance that goes hand in hand with being a sort of Celtic fan. But at the same time, you have people who don't want to have anything to do with politics at all, and that would still come to Parkhead, and that's the way it is.
Absolutely, Paul. Yeah, you're right. And again, a lot of the fans who don't have, they're not as politicised, obviously love the club for what they are, and the football element that I think Celtic have had throughout their history. Celtic didn't start in 1967. I always find that interesting when the greatest ever Celtic team were announced and guys like Jimmy McGrory wasn't in it. He only scored 500 and odd goals. It's still the record goal scorer in British football. But when you talk about Celtic, you talk about music, and you've touched on a few things that you've been involved in with regards to going over and playing in St Pauli. Talk to us about your introduction to music, Paul, yourself, becoming a musician, forming a band. How did that? Is that something that's always been there for you? Was it always going to be your calling?
I don't know. It's just I liked sort of singing and things when I was younger, and not in any kind of way or any form of music stuff. I just kind of got a guitar and found I could play some songs in the Oasis chord book, and I book of 50 Irish songs and 6 chords, one of those ones. But I kind of knew the songs, and I knew kind of a lot of different elements in it. And then playing it, I went to just maybe a couple of times just getting the guitar out and playing with my friends, or I went to Ireland with my grandma and got up and I played Valley of Sleeve in the morning, And it was, went down quite well. I thought, I'm enjoying this. And then as time went on, it kind of progressed from there. But I think sort of when it comes to sort of writing songs, that was something that came much later because, if you write a song, most of the time you kind of write it and then you just leave it in a drawer or in your head. And it's not until you start to play it and go, well, that's actually quite good. So I think when I started writing songs, I think the first one was Cinderella Story, which is about the Irish in Glasgow. And the second one was These Hands, about Jimmy Maley going away to fight in Spain. And all of a sudden, people were like, that's pretty good. So like when we did our first album, it was all Irish songs, or all songs that we liked playing, but there was only 2 original songs on it. Because I think you kind of need a wee bit of confidence in people hearing your stuff and saying that they like it or they approve of it. But people, if they go to watch you, if you're playing an Irish pub, they want the songs that they know. Do you know what I mean? At the time, and that felt that was very much I wish I was a bit braver at the early days to have started writing, a full album out and stuff, but I just didn't at that point. And I think that it wasn't until a bit later, it wasn't until after those first games came out, it was like, do you know what, I'm going to do these songs because I want to tell more about Jimmy Johnson, and I want to sing about the South Side Irish in Glasgow, and that's kind of about, it's about sort of growing confidence as you kind of start playing and start playing more and more, and that's kind of where it went for me.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you mentioned some subjects there, Paul, and you think to yourself that's an incredible kind of range of topics to write about. Celtic, the greatest ever Celt, and Jimmy Johnson. You've obviously gone through the theme of St. Pauli as well, the Irish in Glasgow, and you also mentioned James Maley, and we actually had Professor Willie Maley on a Celtic State of Mind, and one of my favourite interviews, I've got to say, of all time, Paul. It was just, we probably could have spoken for 3 or 4 hours about his dad, and what really struck me was, at that time, a man who was actually going against the grain. He was going against the grain. He was going against the grain of the Catholic Church. And, to do that, the bravery of the man, the single-mindedness of somebody like James Maley to go and do that. How was that received when you wrote a song like that? How was it received by the family and by Professor Willie Maley?
Well, it's like I recorded that. Well, I wrote that song in September 2006. I wrote the song then. I bought as an issue I picked up, and I knew of Jimmy Maley, and I knew of Willie Maley because he used to be in Celtic View years ago. Remember him, and I knew who he was, and I knew of his dad because I'd seen it like International Brigade commemorations and different things. So there was a newspaper article about his dad in the big issue. And I remember buying that, and pretty much the song is a period article. It's almost there. I went home and I wrote it, and then it was the April 2007, I think it was. And what I said to Chris and our boys, the band, was, we'll write the song. I said, we'll let him hear it, and if he likes it, then we'll just, whatever happens from there. So we wrote the song. My mum took her away on holiday. We recorded it at my mum's house. We went the next day to the shops. I think it was maybe one day after. It would have been the next day. And he passed away. He passed away the next day. And so, like, what do we do here? So it was a couple of weeks after. I got in touch with Willie. Chris knew him through different things, to do International Brigades events. I got in touch with him, and we went up to see him up in his office in Glasgow University, and we played him the song, and we said, look, if you don't like this, then we'll not do it. And he took it and listened to it, and he sat down, and he just turned around and he went, my dad liked that song. It's a good fighting song, my dad liked a good fight. And that was it. And and we went out for food together. So I know Willie quite well now, and having written the song, and it was really, it could have been, as I said to him, it could have been like Indy's story. Mm-hmm. So many guys didn't come back from Spain, but it was Jimmy's story. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, And the whole idea with these hands full of flashes, because when I saw the picture of him, and he's standing at the side, and he's standing, his hands are kind of old man hands that are narrowed together. I remember my dad, when I was a boy, saying to me, when you see an old man, remember, he'd have been a great footballer one day, or he could have been a great boxer, or he'd have been fit, or he might have been really handsome, had a good looking girlfriend. And I remember seeing that, and you see an old boy, an old man, you think, he's an old man, this guy, his hands, those same old narrowed hands fought fascists and fought fascism. And that was kind of at that point, and if I never write a song, it wasn't about I was just I wanted to tell his story, and I wanted to do that and just have Wally saying, yeah, that's that's a song I would have liked. I think that was a kind of important thing, and then to have had the chance to play that song at international brigade events, or heard other people singing it, that hopefully that's something that passes down into the future. Somebody sent me a book, an educational, like a historical book, basically a history textbook in England, and that song's in it. So that passage for teaching it in schools in England. I'm like,
that's incredible.
The story of the National Brigades continues. It's the last of them passed away now.
Oh, that's incredible. It's a lasting legacy, really, Paul. And I think when I'm not a musician, I wish I was. I can't play an instrument, but I think when there's any kind of creation of any form of art, the only thing that you could ever wish for is that it leaves some kind of legacy, some kind of document that will live on even after you've gone. So absolutely, that's tremendous. And I'm really, really chuffed with you. And for Willie to say that to you as well, I mean, that's such a touching thing for him to say. And as you say, you must feel that you've arrived, and if you never write another song, then you're happy you've achieved something that's so important there.
I think songs are important. If I've never been able to write like a kind of pop song, if you know what I mean. Everything's had a kind of a story behind it. I think that's the stories in International Brigade. The Brigaders are so much braver than I'll ever be. They've just got a train, snuck into Spain via France, not really knowing what else is going on, because all you're doing is reading the stories that happen in the newspapers that aren't being reported properly or aren't being fully reported. Going against, in Scotland and very much in Ireland, the church, where a lot of time, like left-wing politics, Ireland and socialism was kind of, it existed, not as the church, but it was there at the same time. But then obviously there's the right-wing issues and you side with Franco, and that's any routine to go over and support in Spain. They're seen as communists, they're seen as as going against the grain, and that's, I think, is what is important. The stories are told and exist within folk music, the oral tradition or story. Sometimes people's struggles and are only able to be passed on through music very often in different parts of the world. When you see an uprising and you see anything else, it's the storytellers and the songwriters that pass on their legacies rather than books or rather than anything else for that matter.
Absolutely brilliant, Paul. Now, one final question from a musician. Obviously, it's going to be very difficult during these times. You're not able to get out there. You're not able to get out and perform, Paul, which is something that must be very frustrating for you. How have you managed to deal with that? I know that some people have been, playing live streaming events, that kind of thing. Has it completely hindered you? And is there any way that you can get your music out and perform online using technology like what we're using just now, Zoom?
I've done a couple of things. I did one for food banks in Italy a few weeks ago, and it was just using Acapella, which is an app. You record one bit, pass it on to the next person, pass it on to the next person. And then we did one for a food bank in Manchester that was part of a festival where we were playing at. So that's kind of all we've been doing. It's stuff for in dairy for people trying to get access to, who don't have access to things like Zoom or iPads, so they can keep in touch and keep connected with their loved ones. So we're doing that. I'm not really a big fan of playing in my house, in my room, and going upstairs, and my kids are always running about and coming in, and my wife always feels as though I'm kind of having to be quiet. I don't like having to impose that on them. It's not that I don't like playing, but I feel as though that I'm kind of hindering ruining their day, Peppa Pig and everything else that goes on. I went and did a wee bit of recording as well, as well. So it's kind of like, I don't have as much technology as I like to be able to do, and put out Chris that plays the bass and flute and everything else, and fantastic musician Chris Cruikshank. He's a real audiophile and has loads of stuff. He's got like all the equipment to do, and I'd love to be able to sit down and make a lockdown album, but I don't think it will happen just now. And I'm waiting, but my neighbours are right next door, and all, so these different things kind of happen. But I think it's important to just be able to do it, because I think my sort of mental health as well is strum the guitar and play and sing and try and do something. I can't see whenever music's going to come back into normality, because when pubs open up again, they want to go to their staff, and they want to be able to, stop punters, and if they've got to do it reduced the amount of people that can come in, the last thing they're going to do is put a live musician in the corner. Venues and gigs for us, Brexit's on the horizon for touring musicians, for ourselves, so there's so many things that just make me go, oh man. So I think I have to embrace what technology I can use and try and do some things as well, because it's maybe the only outlet to having any form of playing music between now and till lockdown lifts and whatever phase it's going to lift. So I mean, I'll still continue to do bits. I did stuff on Malone's bar on Saturday, and I'll do things over the next few weeks for a few other different causes and different other events as well. I've got so many friends that are full-time musicians that have lost their livelihood for the time being.
Yeah.
So I'm very much in solidarity with them, and to other people that have lost their livelihood through the jobs that they do. So I think for me to have any sort of sympathy for this is very selfish. So, but it's just I've got to do what I can do in these times. So if it takes getting a guitar out and playing down Zoom and cheering up a few folk, if I become Saturday night's entertainment, then so be it. But the sooner things change, the better.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right, Paul. And we've started thinking about how we're going to be watching Celtic. After the lockdown, there might be games, but it may well not be in front of a stadium packed full of Celtic supporters. So we might be, watching you on a Friday night and watching Celtic live on a laptop on a Saturday afternoon for some time. So if and when that happens, it would be great if a Celtic State of Mind could maybe hook up with you guys, and we could maybe do something together. That would be great to collaborate and maybe raise a few quid for good causes as well, Paul. But listen, I've been looking forward to speaking to you for some time. Hopefully, once we're allowed, we can hook up in person, and you can maybe bring a guitar along, and we'll meet up in the studio in Glasgow and maybe record something as well, Paul.
Excellent. I'd love that. Yeah, that'd be fantastic, Paul.
That would be great. Listen, take care until that time, and stay safe.
You too, all the best to you, and I'll catch up with you on the other side, as they're saying these days.